Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. So glad to see you. Sorry for canceling last week. I had a stomach flu, and I had it for 48 hours, and it was not fun. And I thought, I did not give this to anyone ever. Maybe my worst enemy, I don't know. But I thought it would be better to postpone for a week. And I fear people will fall asleep, but for and that of opera. We've always, but what we always had is the best opera, which is always music here, dramas, for instance. First in that musical had late Renaissance. Late Renaissance was a time of great experimentation in every possible way. And I would love to come back and talk to you about some of the things that Renaissance composers were doing at the end of the 15th and into the 16th century. The end of the 16th century was absolutely just mind-boggling. Intellectuals would get together. They tried to imitate Greek art and poetry. And everyone always thinks that the Renaissance in music begins with throwing off the kind of the medieval church-heavy yoke and turning to the Greeks. Not so fast. It was the end of the Renaissance in music that they really did it. And some people, what they were doing, here a painting, some of the people, was that they called them Florentine Camerata. And to go back in time, I would love to go and hang with the guys at the Florence Camerata. They had and talk and about music and elections. Wealthy guy named Count Bardi. And Count Bardi hosted these get-togethers. And during these get-togethers, they would discuss art, poetry, music, dance, theater, and then they would try to create some. A couple of the people that I think are really important, and I've kind of highlighted them, is Vincenzo Galilei. Does that name ring a bell at all? Yeah, Galileo. Galileo is actually his son. And Vincenzo Galilei is a really interesting guy because he was a music theorist, and he was a musician as well, and he was a poet, and he was a scientist, and he was kind of the quintessential Renaissance man. And one of the interesting things that Galilei did was he wrote about why are we dividing the octave into just 12 tones? Why can't we divide it even further into microtones? And he starts building all of these really interesting instruments. He builds a keyboard that has 27 keys during an octave. We have 12. He starts to write music for these kinds of things because he wants it to be more expressive. And so he is dealing with theory, music theory, but he's also trying for expressivity. Giulio Caccini, the second guy down there, he writes a whole treatise that he calls The New Music. And what he's talking about is making music more expressive and how we can do that. He starts talking about ornamentation. He starts talking about the way that harmonies and dissonances work can really make things more expressive. He's very interesting, and this is a very important treatise that everyone read. The other guy, Jacopo Peri, he writes a lot, and he writes a lot about this thing called monody. So monody is kind of absolutely essential for opera to be born. Because monody is such an easy definition, but it's very strange. So what is monody? Basically, it's all manner of solo singing in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. It includes arias, madrigals, everything. So what does that mean? What they started talking about with expressivity was that it's much more expressive if one person is singing and you understand that person's emotion than if a whole choir was singing about it. My mother used to say, to end all wars, don't show a battlefield with 1 million people dead. Tell the story of one. And you would understand that much more. So they started saying, let's get rid of all of these madrigals, which are, 4 or 5 people singing the same text. Get rid of all of that and go to solo singing. Because in solo singing, what you will get is much more emotion and much more understanding of those emotions of that character. And he talks about it. Then he goes on to talk about the fact that they've discovered that all of those Greek plays that they've unearthed and are studying were sung throughout. Now, is that true? It is. So, did you all have to read Aeschylus or Homer? We did. I did. All of that was sung. Why don't we sing it anymore? We don't have the music left. We have very little actual Greek music. For a long time, scholars did not think that there was a musical notation. Scholars thought that Greek music was just improvised, and that was the way it is. A lot of it was improvised. But we do know now that there was a musical notation. And we have, over thousands of years, we still have about 15 minutes worth of music written down that we can actually decipher. And some of it is from choruses, or those Greek choruses in those plays. And scholars discovered in the 17th century, in the 16th century, that all of it was sung. Everything was sung. It wasn't just like a musical theater piece, but it was much closer to an opera. And Perry said, I'm going to write the first opera imitating the Greeks. And this is what turns into opera. So he is actually the first person to do it. Now, my favorite other thing is that Perry's the first person to do it. That guy, Giulio Caccini, said that he was first, and they fight it out for the rest of their lives. Caccini lost in music history books. So, what does he write? So he decides, here's a portrait of him in the upper right, and what was also really great is that he would often write these parts for himself because he was a singer. He was also an instrumentalist, and here is a portrait of him in one of the first operas, so that he would write the whole thing and then he would dance. He would dance as well, but he would perform in it. He wrote one whole opera called Daphne. And musicologists are incredibly sad because it's completely lost. We don't know anything of it. There isn't even one aria left. But then he did something really great. Daphne is all lost. Then he works with the same poet, and he says, hey, write me Eurydice. And he says, I'm going to write in a completely new way. And this new manner of writing for the voice is recitative. Now, underneath there, I've written, why was recitative necessary for the invention of opera? And it's because recitative approaches speech, but it isn't spoken, it is sung. And I hate to tell you, but the only one that I can ever conjure up in my head when I talk about this is something from Amal and the Night Visitors, which I first saw when I was 9. And the mother says sings at one point, I'm going to the door right now, and then, young man, you'll have to reckon with me. Now, that's nothing anybody would ever remember. It's nothing you're going to sing in the shower. However, and it sounds almost like she's singing it. She's saying it. You know, you can just hear her mother say it like that. You'll have to reckon with me. But it's sung. And that's what he is so brilliant at. Because what Perry does is he writes recitative. Now, in early opera, what is the purpose of recitative? It is the place where dialogue happens, action happens. It's where there's conversations. You can't have a conversation in a song. A song is reflective. And so therefore, what Perry would do is he would have action and write it in recitative. And then, after some action has happened or something has been revealed in the dialogue, then you get a moment of reflection. That moment of reflection is an aria. And basically, the definition of an aria is a song. It is a song put in the middle of an opera. And so, therefore, a lot of the early operas were recitative, aria. Recitative, aria. Or reflection, action, reflection. Action, reflection. And this is what's so necessary. So, I thought I would play a little bit of the prologue. Peri's Eurydice. Well, before I play it, let me just say why he wrote it. I've got two little scenes. The work was premiered as part of the entertainment of a whole long wedding celebration for the Medici. Here's the bride room. They're having this big wedding. This is a big this. There's entertainment. There's banquet. To set. Greeks chooses Orpheus. Does he choose Orpheus? Because Orpheus, a musician. Story, remember it. The story is that he gets Eurydice. The time she dies, and to the music is center. He's a musician. There's a reason for him. There's love. There's got everything in it. Can you imagine why the bride didn't like it very much? So what is that other people who weren't this is a beautiful way to illuminate people's emotions and what they do. So let me show you a little bit of it. Really a chamber opera. There's a handful of characters. It was staged smaller, the wedding guests, and about there were a couple of recorders, but that was it. So it's much more. And let's see what you think about this way that Peri's going to tell the story. Tragedy. She out and says, "I'll tell you this story." It's a tragic story.